I never expected Natalie to come crawling back. My stomach tightened as I recognized the familiar handwriting on the envelope. My name is Owen Grady, and I'm 38 years old. Each morning I wake before sunrise in the home I built with my own hands, review blueprints, and drive to job sites where my restoration company has become synonymous with quality. The letter from my ex-wife Natalie sat unopened for 3 days on my kitchen counter. My mentor Ray urged me to throw it away without reading it, while my office manager Diane suggested closure might be healthy. The ceramic mug I was holding nearly cracked under my grip when I finally tore it open and saw her desperate plea for a second chance at what we lost. After 6 years of silence, she suddenly remembered my worth the moment she spotted me in that Rolls-Royce. Before I go any further, let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching from. And make sure to subscribe because tomorrow I will share a story you don't want to miss. But let me start from the beginning. It was an October morning when everything started to crack. Our townhouse kitchen was cramped but used to feel cozy, sun streaming through those cheap white blinds. Coffee brewing while Natalie and I moved around each other in a comfortable dance we'd perfected over 5 years of marriage. But that morning, there was no dance, just distance. I sat at our small dining table flipping through a stack of invoices. Red overdue stamps stared back at me like accusatory eyes. I'd been tracking expenses in a beat-up ledger, creating a financial puzzle that refused to be solved. "We're 3 weeks late on the Anderson payment," I said, more to myself than to Natalie. "And the Wilsons just called to postpone their kitchen remodel until spring." Natalie didn't look up from her phone. Her thumb scrolled mindlessly, her lips pressed into that tight line I'd grown to dread. Was all she offered. "Just temporary," I added, shuffling papers. "The market's always slow this time of year." She finally glanced up, eyes flat. "You said that in July." I reached for my coffee, now cold. The ceramic was chipped along the rim. Everything in our life seemed to be wearing thin these days. Construction's cyclical. It'll pick up after the holidays. The holidays we can't afford to celebrate? Her voice had that edge, the one that sliced through my optimism like a box cutter. I was about to answer when my phone buzzed. The contractor's ringtone. I answered, forcing brightness into my voice. Owen Grady Restoration. The Millers. Another cancellation. I felt Natalie watching as my shoulders sagged. When I hung up, she set her phone down with deliberate calm. "How many is that this month?" she asked. "Fourth one." I tried to sound matter-of-fact. "They'll be back once the economy stabilizes." "And when will that be?" She stood carrying her coffee mug to the sink. "Maybe it's time to consider something stable, Owen. Carpenter for someone else's company. Regular paycheck." I'd built my business from scratch, from the logo I'd designed on our honeymoon to the reputation I'd earned for detail work that bigger companies rushed through. Working for someone else felt like failure. "I'm not giving up 5 years of hard work because of a temporary setback." She turned, leaning against the counter. The morning light caught her blonde hair, but her eyes remained shadowed. "A temporary setback is a month. This has been a year. I'll make next month's rent," I promised. "I've got 3 small repair jobs lined up." "Repair jobs?" She sighed. "Not renovations, not the high-end work you want." "It's honest work," I said, feeling my neck grow hot. "It pays bills." "Barely." Her gaze drifted to the window to the neighbor's newer car parked outside. "I'm just tired of barely, Owen." That evening, I came home from a busted pipe repair job, clothes damp and hands raw. The house was quiet, but lights were on. I found Natalie in our bedroom, applying mascara in the mirror. "Going somewhere?" I asked, dirt still under my fingernails. She glanced at me in the reflection. "Dinner with Melissa." "Tonight?" I didn't hide my surprise. "I thought maybe we could talk about—" "I've been cooped up all day," she cut me off. "I need some air." I watched her slip on heels that didn't match the financial reality reflected in our empty refrigerator. Something felt off, but I nodded. "Have fun." It was past midnight when the front door clicked open. I was still awake, staring at job listings I'd never apply for, pride and fear battling in my chest. "How is Melissa?" I asked as Natalie moved through the dark living room. She stiffened slightly. "Fine. You were out late." "I told you," she said, voice cool. "I needed air." The next morning, Breakfast was silent. Forks scraped against plates, coffee cups touched lips and table without conversation to soften the sounds. We'd become experts at avoiding eye contact, at existing in the same space without connecting. My phone buzzed against the table. Another cancellation text. I stared at it, feeling the weight of repeated disappointment. Natalie's exhale was loud enough to fill the room. "Maybe I married a dreamer," she said, not quite looking at me. The words stung worse than any financial setback. I set my phone down and really looked at her, this woman who'd once believed in me enough to build a life together. "The business is struggling," I said carefully. "But that's not what this is about anymore, is it?" She didn't answer, just gathered her plate and walked to the sink. I followed, needing to understand where we'd lost each other. "Markets recover, Natalie. Money comes and goes, but faith, that's the foundation. If you don't believe in me anymore..." "I'm tired, Owen." She cut me off, turning away. "I can't do this now." I grabbed my jacket and keys, needing space to breathe. At the front door, I paused, watching her silhouette against the kitchen window. She thought I'd already left when she whispered to herself, words that weren't meant for me to hear. I can't keep pretending this will work. But I heard every word, and each one felt like the foundation cracking beneath my feet. The following evening, rain pounded against the windows like an angry fist. I trudged up our walkway, my boots squelching with each step, water dripping from my hair down the back of my neck. The repair job I'd been called to, a leaking roof during the worst downpour in months, had taken 3 hours longer than expected, and my clothes were soaked through despite the raincoat. I fumbled with my keys, fingers numb from cold, and pushed open the front door. The house was quiet except for the drumming of rain against the roof. A single lamp cast soft light across our small living room. Natalie sat by the window, silhouetted against the stormy darkness outside. The wine glass in her hand caught the light, half empty already. Something in her posture, rigid, composed, distant, sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with my wet clothes. "Hey," I said, shrugging off my dripping jacket. "Some storm, huh?" She didn't turn to look at me, just took another sip of wine. I stood there, water pooling around my boots on the entryway tiles. The silence stretched between us, heavy with words unspoken. I'd felt this coming for weeks, maybe months, but seeing it now, the reality of what was about to happen, hit me like a physical blow. "What's this about?" I finally asked, my voice low. Natalie set down her wine glass with a deliberate click against the side table. When she finally turned to me, her expression was smooth, controlled, as though she'd rehearsed this moment. "I've been thinking," she said, each word measured and calm. "I can't do this anymore, Owen. I can't live under this constant financial strain." The rain seemed to grow louder in the silence that followed. I stepped further into the room, leaving wet footprints on the floor we'd once picked out together. "Is there someone else?" The question burned my throat. She looked away, back toward the window. "This isn't about anyone else." "That's not an answer, Nat." "I need stability," she said, still not meeting my eyes. "I need to know I won't be 60 and still worrying about making rent." I remembered how we used to lie in bed, planning the house we'd build someday. The sketches I'd drawn on napkins while we ate cheap takeout, laughing about the marble countertops and walk-in closets we'd have someday. Those dreams had felt solid then, not like the fragile things they'd become. "Give me one more chance," I said, moving closer, my voice catching. "The economy will turn around. I'll take on more jobs, any jobs." "I'm done." She cut me off, finally looking directly at me. "I'm done scraping by, Owen. I'm done with the promises that next month will be better. We took vows," I reminded her, my hands shaking. "For better or worse, remember?" Her laugh was hollow, empty of any warmth. "Not when the dream dies." She stood, smoothing her hands over her skirt. "Not when I have to choose between paying for groceries or electricity." A lightning flash illuminated the room for a moment, throwing her face into sharp relief. The woman I'd married, and the stranger she'd become, both visible at once. She grabbed her purse from the couch. "I'm going to pack a bag." "Natalie, please." I reached for her arm, but she stepped away. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I followed her to the stairs, watching as she climbed them with the same graceful posture she'd had the day we married. At the bedroom doorway, I stopped. She pulled a suitcase from the closet and began filling it with mechanical efficiency, as though she'd thought about what to take many times before. "Please, Nat," I said, my voice barely audible over the thunder outside. "Let's talk in the morning. When we're both calmer." She paused, hands hovering over the suitcase, then continued folding a sweater. The zipper closing sounded final, like a period at the end of a sentence that couldn't be unwritten. "There's nothing left to talk about," she said, lifting the case off the bed. I stepped aside as she moved past me, her perfume, the expensive kind I'd bought her last Christmas despite our tight budget, lingering in the air. I didn't follow her down the stairs. Some endings demand their privacy. In the dark kitchen, I stood motionless, listening to the front door open and close. The sound of her car starting mixed with the drumming of rain on the roof. Then tires on wet pavement, growing fainter until there was nothing but the storm. Morning came with the kind of gray light that makes you wish you could just pull the covers back over your head and pretend the world doesn't exist. I'd been up most of the night anyway, sitting in the living room, staring at nothing, waiting for something to make sense again. I heard Natalie's footsteps before I saw her, the careful tread of someone trying not to wake anyone, except I wasn't asleep. I was at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a coffee mug that had long gone cold. She hesitated in the doorway when she saw me, suitcase already in hand. Her hair was pulled back, makeup perfect, like she was heading to an interview instead of walking out on 7 years of marriage. "You're up early," she said. "Never went to bed." She nodded like that made perfect sense, then moved to the coffee maker. I watched her pour herself a cup with the same routine she'd followed thousands of mornings before. 3 seconds of cream, no sugar, stir twice clockwise. Some habits die hard, even when everything else is falling apart. The silence between us felt like a physical thing, thick and suffocating. I should have been angry, should have yelled or pleaded or something. But I just felt hollow, like someone had scooped everything out of me and left nothing but an echo. Natalie reached into her purse and pulled out a white envelope, placing it carefully on the table between us. "What's this?" I asked, though I already knew. "Divorce papers." She took a sip of her coffee, not meeting my eyes. "I've already signed my part. The attorney said it shouldn't be complicated since we're splitting everything 50-50. I stared at the envelope but didn't touch it. It looked so ordinary, so harmless. Just paper and ink. But it might as well have been a bomb for what it was about to do to my life. "Just like that?" My voice came out steadier than I expected. She shrugged, a gesture that somehow made the whole thing worse. Like our marriage was just another item on her to-do list now checked off. "You'll be fine, Owen." She set her mug down, barely touched. "You always find a way." And then she was moving toward the door, rolling suitcase trailing behind her like an obedient pet. I wanted to say something that would make her stay or at least make her hurt the way I was hurting, but the words wouldn't come. The door closed with a soft click, and I sat there until her coffee went cold beside mine. The days that followed blurred together. I went through the motions of living, showered, ate something when I remembered, answered calls from the few clients I had left. But I was moving underwater, everything slow and distant. Reality only snapped back into focus when I sat across from Aisha Patel, the attorney handling the divorce. Her office smelled like lemon furniture polish and old books. "The filing is official, Mr. Grady," she said, sliding papers across her desk. Her voice was kind but matter-of-fact. "Given the circumstances and your joint agreement, this should proceed relatively quickly." 50-50, I asked. "Yes, the townhouse will be sold, proceeds split equally. Same for savings furniture, anything acquired during the marriage." I nodded, pen hovering over the signature line. 50% of nearly nothing. Lucky me. Aisha's eyes softened slightly. "I know this isn't easy, Mr. Grady, but from a legal standpoint, it's as straightforward as these things get." I signed my name and felt the last 7 years of my life reduced to a legal transaction. 2 weeks later, I was loading the last box into my truck outside the townhouse. 50% of our belongings barely filled the bed. I stood there, keys in hand, not sure where to go next. Ray Fulton answered that question for me. He'd been my first boss when I started in construction years ago before I'd gone out on my own. When I called him just to talk, He'd offered his garage apartment without hesitation. "It ain't much," he said when I pulled up to his place that evening. "But it's dry and the fridge works." The apartment was barely that, just a room above his detached garage with a kitchenette and bathroom smaller than some closets. But it had a bed and a roof, which was more than I deserved from a man I'd barely kept in touch with over the years. We settled into a routine fast. Evenings after work, I'd help Ray restore old tools he collected from estate sales. We'd eat takeout sitting on overturned paint buckets in his workshop, talking about everything except what had brought me there. One night, about a week in, he handed me a socket wrench and asked the question I'd been dreading. "What's next for you, son?" I looked down at my hands, calloused and scarred from years of work. Hands that had built things, fixed things, provided a life that hadn't been enough to keep my wife. "Rebuild," I said finally. "From scratch." Ray nodded, not offering empty reassurances or pity. He just passed me another tool and went back to work on the vise he was restoring. We worked in silence after that, the rhythmic hammering echoing through the garage like the heartbeat of something new being born. Something that might last. I woke to sunlight slicing through dusty windows, painting stripes across the garage apartment floor. For a second, I forgot where I was, reaching across the cot for Natalie before reality crashed back. This narrow bed, this borrowed room, this new life. I sat up, rubbing sleep from my eyes. The digital clock on the milk crate beside me read 6:17 a.m. Old habits died hard. I'd spent years waking before dawn to get to job sites. A knock at the door pulled me fully awake. Ray stood there, coffee mug in one hand, piece of paper in the other. "Morning," he said, extending both toward me. "Got something that might interest you?" I took the coffee first, then the paper, a handwritten note with an address and phone number. "Guy over on Maple Drive," Ray explained. "Storm knocked down part of his fence. Nothing fancy, just needs someone who knows which end of a hammer to hold." I stared at the note. "You're giving me one of your jobs?" Ray shrugged. "My shoulder's acting up. Besides, you need the work more than I do." I swallowed hard, grateful for both the coffee and the opportunity. "Thanks, Ray." "Don't thank me yet. It's cash only and he's particular." I nodded. "I'll head over after breakfast." "Good man." Ray turned to leave, then paused. "There's eggs in the fridge. Make yourself something real before you go." The fence job was straightforward. 3 panels down, posts intact but leaning. 8 hours of work in the hot sun, but the homeowner paid in crisp 20s that I folded carefully into my wallet. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Earned with my hands, not borrowed or begged. That became my routine. Wake early, find work. Come home exhausted, but with a few more dollars than the day before. Ray connected me with odd jobs around town. Leaky faucets, sticky doors, patched drywall. Nothing that would make me rich, but enough to keep me from drowning. Some mornings I'd find a note slipped under my door. Another lead, another chance. Other days, Ray would join me on small projects, not because he needed to, but because he knew I needed the company. "Always quote fair," he'd say as we loaded tools into my truck. "Not cheap, not expensive, fair. People remember fair." "And if they want cheap?" I asked, thinking of the jobs I'd lost before Natalie left. "Then they get what they pay for," he said simply. "And it won't be your problem." He taught me things they don't cover in contractor school. How to keep honest ledgers even when it's just you and a client. How to estimate materials so you don't eat the cost of waste. How to look a homeowner in the eye when you deliver bad news about their property. Each night we'd sit in his workshop eating takeout, Chinese on Tuesdays, pizza on Fridays, whatever was on special the rest of the week. We'd talk about the day's work, local gossip, anything except Natalie and the divorce papers still sitting in my truck's glove compartment. Slowly, laughter found its way back into my evenings. Not the full-throated kind, but something quieter. A chuckle at Ray's dry jokes, a smile at a story about some ridiculous customer from his contracting days. 3 weeks in, my phone rang on a Saturday morning. Pastor Henry from St. Mary's Church needed someone to repair storm damage to their sanctuary roof and side entrance. The regular contractor was booked solid for a month. "Ray mentioned you might be available," the pastor said, his voice gentle but urgent. "We have services to hold." I quoted him a fair price, just like Ray taught me, and promised to start that afternoon. The job was bigger than anything I'd tackled since reopening. Damaged ceiling panels, water-warped floorboards near the entrance, and intricate trim work around century-old windows. I worked 16-hour days, sleeping just enough to keep my hands steady. By Thursday evening, the sanctuary was ready for weekend services. Pastor Henry walked through as I was packing up my tools. His eyes swept across the repaired ceiling, the replaced flooring, the restored trim. "This is remarkable work, Owen," he said, resting a hand on my shoulder. "Truly, you've given our congregation back their spiritual home." Something stirred in my chest then. Not pride exactly, but purpose. I'd built something that mattered to someone, regardless of what I was paid. That night, back in the garage apartment, I found a scrap of paper and a marker. In bold letters, I wrote Grady Restoration and tacked it to the wall above my workbench. I stood back, looking at those two words in the dim light. My name, my work, my future, maybe. Outside, rain began to fall, pattering softly against the roof. I listened to its rhythm, steady and clean. "This is where it turns," I whispered to the empty room, to myself, to whatever might be listening. "This is where it turns." 3 months later, I woke to birdsong instead of frost on the window. Spring had finally broken winter's back. I'd been so busy I barely noticed the seasons changing. My phone buzzed with another referral, my third that week. Pastor Henry had been talking me up to his congregation, and they'd been talking to their neighbors. Word of mouth travels fast in small towns when you do honest work. "Got the Henderson job," I told Ray over coffee in his kitchen. "Bathroom remodel starting Monday." Ray grinned, flipping through his pocket calendar where he'd taken to keeping track of my schedule. What had started as the occasional job had become a steady flow of work, nothing huge but consistent. "You're booked 3 weeks out now," he said. "Might need to think about bringing on some help." I shook my head. Not ready for that. But I could use some help with the scheduling. I slid the Henderson contract across to him. "Would you mind handling the paperwork side? I'll bump you 10%. Ray's eyebrows shot up. 5%. I'm not taking advantage. 8, I countered. "And you know it's not taking advantage if I need the help." He reluctantly agreed, and just like that, I had my first business partner. Well, not officially, but it felt like a step toward something real. That same week, we landed our first commercial contract, repairing the facade of Manny's Diner downtown. Residential was my bread and butter, but small business work paid better and led to more contacts. "You'll need quality hardwood for those window frames," Ray said, reviewing the diner specs. "Try Fulton Supply. Ask for Lena at the counter. She'll set you straight." "Lena?" "My daughter. Runs the accounts over there." He hesitated. "She's good with numbers. Better than me, anyway." I'd heard about Ray's daughter in passing. Accounting degree, divorced a few years back, moved home to be closer to her dad. But he didn't talk about her much, and I never pushed. Fulton Supply occupied an old warehouse at the edge of town. Inside, the smell of fresh-cut pine and sawdust hit me immediately, a scent I'd always loved. I approached the front counter where a brunette with serious eyes was reviewing invoices. "Help you?" she asked, not looking up immediately. "I'm looking for Lena," I said. "Ray sent me." That got her attention. Her eyes, the same warm brown as Ray's, met mine with sudden interest. "Dad sent you? You must be Owen." She extended her hand. "Lena Fulton. He talks about you constantly." "All complaints, I'm sure," I joked, shaking her hand. "Hardly. Though he says you're stubborn about taking help." The corner of her mouth quirked up. "He finally found someone who can outwork him, which is saying something." I laughed. "Your dad's been a lifesaver." "So, I've heard. What can I get you?" I showed her the specs for the diner project, and she immediately started suggesting alternatives to what I'd planned. Cheaper for the same quality, or better quality for the same price. She knew her inventory like I knew my tools. "Let me put this order together," she said, making quick notes. "I can get you a contractor discount on the maple if you're planning to order regularly." "That'd be great. Thanks." Our first conversation was brief but stuck with me. There was something refreshingly direct about her. No games, just competence. I went back to Fulton Supply twice that month for the diner project. And each time, Lena had suggestions that saved me money without cutting corners. By the third visit, she'd started asking questions about my business model. "You're charging by the job, not hourly?" she asked while calculating my order. "It's simpler," I shrugged. She shook her head. "You're leaving money on the table, and your supply costs aren't being tracked properly." "Meaning?" "Meaning you're probably spending more than you need to." She hesitated. "I could take a look at your books sometime, if you want." 3 weeks later, she came by the garage after work. I spread my ledgers across Ray's workbench, embarrassingly disorganized notes and receipts that I'd been managing by gut feeling rather than proper accounting. Lena didn't laugh, though she had every right to. Instead, she pulled up a stool and started organizing everything into neat piles. "You're actually doing better than you think," she said after an hour of review. "But your system is a mess, and you're missing tax deductions." She identified 3 major profit leaks, negotiated better terms with my suppliers, and set up a simple bookkeeping system I could actually follow. By the time autumn painted the trees golden red, my business had grown enough to justify renting a small office downtown. Nothing fancy, just a room above the hardware store with a desk and filing cabinet. The day I signed the lease and registered Grady Restoration and Design as an official business, Ray insisted on a celebration. We sat behind his garage on old lawn chairs, eating burgers from the grill and drinking cold beer as twilight settled over us. Lena joined us, bringing a homemade apple pie that reminded me of better times. Ray raised his beer bottle. "To building again," he said simply. I clinked my bottle against his, then Lena's. "To never stopping." That night, as I checked my messages, I noticed a voicemail from the manager of the Westfield Hotel. They needed renovation work on their lobby and restaurant, my biggest potential job yet. 6 years passed like water under a bridge, flowing, constant, unstoppable. I stood in my warehouse office, leaning against the drafting table as morning light spilled through the tall windows. The space was a converted textile factory with exposed brick walls, timber beams, and enough square footage to house both our design studio and fabrication shop. Across the concrete floor, our team of 12 moved with purpose. Carpenters cutting custom moldings, designers finalizing renderings, project managers coordinating deliveries. The Grady Restoration and Design logo, a simple, elegant G with a hammer, hung proudly above the entrance. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring at it, remembering those first days working from Ray's garage with nothing but determination and his borrowed tools. "These measurements don't match the site specs," Lena said, tapping her finger against the blueprint spread between us. Her brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore the company polo with the same professionalism she brought to everything. "Good catch," I nodded, marking the discrepancy. "The Patterson job?" "Yeah. We need to adjust the cabinet run or we'll hit the electrical panel." 6 years had transformed Lena from occasional bookkeeper to full-time operations manager. She'd built our accounting systems, streamlined our bidding process, and become the backbone of our growth. What started as friendly advice had evolved into a business partnership I couldn't imagine functioning without. The door swung open as Ray ambled in, carrying a cardboard tray with 3 coffees. At 68, he still consulted on projects despite his so-called retirement. "Morning workaholic," Ray said, setting the tray down. "Thought you could use the good stuff from Marley's." "Thanks," I said, accepting the cup. "You're just in time to hear about the Patterson job." Ray's eyes crinkled at the corners. "That fancy place on Oakwood? The one with all the marble?" "That's the one," Lena confirmed, taking her coffee. 6 bathrooms, custom kitchen, and hardwood throughout. Ray whistled low. "Far cry from fixing fences, ain't it?" I smiled, remembering those early jobs. "Long way from sleeping on your garage cot, too." "Knew you had it in you," Ray said, clapping my shoulder with weathered hands. "Just needed somewhere to start." We'd come a long way from those desperate days after Natalie left. The memory no longer stung like it once did, just a distant echo of a different life. That afternoon, I drove to Westlake Automotive to finalize the dealership renovation we'd just completed. Sleek glass showroom, custom lighting, and handcrafted display platforms, all finished 2 weeks early and under budget. Marcus Wellington, the dealership owner, greeted me with a wide smile and firm handshake. "Owen, the man who makes miracles happen." Just doing what we promised, I said as we walked the showroom floor. Team did a great job. That's an understatement. Sales are up 30% since we reopened. People come in just to see the space. After signing the final paperwork, Marcus guided me toward a separate area of the showroom floor, where a black Rolls-Royce Ghost gleamed under perfect lighting. Beautiful, isn't it? He asked. Spectacular, I agreed, admiring the craftsmanship. It could be yours, Marcus said casually. Dealership demo. Previous owner decided on another model. We've had it 3 months. I can let it go at cost. I laughed. Right. I'm serious, he insisted. Consider it a volume discount on the renovation. Plus, having Grady Restoration's owner driving one of our finest would be excellent advertising. The figure he named was steep, but not impossible. 6 years of careful growth and reinvestment had built a solid company. For the first time, I could consider such a purchase without financial ruin. I thought about it for 3 days before saying yes. 2 weeks later, I drove downtown in the Rolls, windows down despite the crisp autumn air. The car hummed beneath me, powerful and understated. Our company logo had been subtly added to the doors, Marcus's idea for the promotional discount. The light changed to red at Main Street and I eased to a stop. That's when I saw her. Natalie stood on the corner, balancing grocery bags in both arms, her blonde hair shorter than I remembered. 6 years had changed her too. Slight lines around her eyes, a weariness in her posture that hadn't been there before. Our eyes met through the open window. Recognition dawned slowly, then all at once. Her mouth formed a perfect O of surprise as she looked from me to the Rolls-Royce and back again. The bag shifted in her arms as she took half a step toward the car. For a moment I was transported back to our kitchen, hearing her say those words that changed everything. I'm tired of being poor. The light turned green. I held her gaze for 1 beat longer, then smoothly accelerated through the intersection without acknowledgement. In the rearview mirror, I watched her turn to follow the car's path, grocery bags clutched against her chest. As the distance between us grew, I saw her lips form my name. Owen. Then the Rolls-Royce rounded the corner, and she disappeared from view, left standing on the sidewalk as I drove away, just as she had left me 6 years before. The morning after seeing Natalie, I arrived early at the office. The sunrise painted the sky in shades of amber and gold as I unlocked the front door, the weight of yesterday's encounter still pressing on my chest. I'd slept poorly, memories I thought I'd buried rising to the surface like old nails working through floorboards. At my desk, I spread out the Patterson contract and began marking sections for review. We were bidding on a full restoration of a historic mansion, the kind of prestigious project that would have seemed impossible 6 years ago. I smiled, thinking of how Ray would react when I told him we'd been shortlisted. My phone buzzed, dancing slightly across the polished desk surface. Unknown number. I picked it up, expecting a vendor or potential client. Hey, it's Natalie. Can we talk? My thumb hovered over the screen. For a moment, I considered blocking the number immediately. Instead, I set the phone face down without replying. Some ghost didn't deserve acknowledgement. By lunchtime, I'd pushed the message from my mind. Lena arrived with sandwiches from the deli across the street and blueprints for the Patterson project. Her efficiency was remarkable, another reason our company had grown so steadily. I've run the numbers again, she said, spreading the papers between us. If we source the hardwood through Miller instead of Westbrook, we can cut costs without compromising quality. We spent the afternoon deep in planning, the phone forgotten in my desk drawer. Until the next morning. Another message. I saw you yesterday. You look good, Owen, really good. I deleted it without replying. The pattern continued through the week. Each message grew more personal, more nostalgic. Remember that cabin in Vermont? I was thinking about that weekend. I've missed your laugh. No one else laughs quite like you. By Friday, the tone had shifted. I made mistakes. I miss what we had. Please just talk to me. I was reviewing supplier quotes when Lena knocked on my office door. She entered with her typical efficiency, tablet in hand, but stopped short when she saw my face. You look like someone's been sanding you with 80 grit, she said bluntly. What's wrong? I hesitated. Lena and I had developed a solid professional relationship over the years, edging gradually into friendship. But I rarely discussed personal matters at work. "It's nothing," I said, waving my hand dismissively. She settled into the chair across from me, setting her tablet down. "Try again. I've watched you check your phone 15 times in the last hour. You never check your phone." The directness of her observation surprised a laugh out of me. I ran a hand over my face, feeling the stubble I'd neglected to shave that morning. "Remember that woman I saw downtown? The one in the Rolls?" Lena nodded. "Your ex-wife. She's been texting, wants to meet up, talk about old times." I shrugged, aiming for casual. "It's nothing." "Doesn't look like nothing," Lena observed. Her brown eyes held concern, not judgment. "You've been building this company from scratch for 6 years. She shows up now? Timing's convenient, isn't it?" I agreed. Lena hesitated, then asked carefully, "Does it matter, her reaching out?" I considered the question, remembering the weight of loneliness after Natalie left. How I'd measured my days by the absence of her voice, her laugh, her presence in our home. "No," I said finally. "It doesn't." And I meant it. That evening, I deleted every message without reading the newest ones. Then I blocked her number, feeling lighter with each tap of my finger. Whatever Natalie wanted, it wasn't my concern anymore. 2 nights later, I was reviewing plans for the Patterson project in my home office when headlights swept across the driveway, illuminating the room briefly before cutting off. The sound of a car door slamming echoed in the quiet night. I moved to the window, pulling the curtain aside slightly. There she stood in my driveway, Natalie, clutching her purse nervously, staring up at the house I'd built with my own hands. Her blonde hair caught the porch light as she straightened her shoulders and started toward the front door. The doorbell rang, its chime resonating through the quiet house. I stood frozen for a moment, caught between past and present. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let her stand there in the cold until she gave up and left. But I knew Natalie's persistence. She wouldn't leave without saying whatever she'd come to say. Better to face it now than wonder when she'd appear next. I crossed the living room slowly, each step deliberate. At the door, I paused, exhaling once to steady myself. 6 years since I'd heard her voice up close. 6 years of building something she couldn't touch or take. I turned the knob, ready for a confrontation 6 years overdue. Golden evening light washed over the porch as I opened the door. Natalie stood there, a silhouette against the setting sun, her blonde hair catching the last rays. She'd dressed carefully. I recognized the calculated effort in her appearance, the way she always prepared for important conversations. Designer jeans, a cashmere sweater, makeup applied with precision. "Owen." Her voice was soft, almost reverent. "Thank you for opening the door." I nodded but said nothing, keeping one hand on the doorframe. The familiar scent of her perfume drifted toward me, the same one she'd worn throughout our marriage. Funny how some things don't change. Her eyes moved past me, taking in the entryway of the house I'd built myself. "This place is beautiful," she said, genuine admiration in her voice. "You've done well for yourself." "Thanks." I kept my tone neutral. "What can I do for you, Natalie?" She shifted her weight, clutching her purse tighter. "Could I come in, just to talk?" "I think here is fine." I didn't move from the doorway. Remember those old westerns where 2 gunfighters meet at high noon? That tension in the air before anyone draws? That's what this felt like, except we were both aiming words instead of pistols. "Right, of course." She nodded too quickly, disappointment flickering across her face. "I've been trying to reach you." "I noticed." "You didn't answer." "No." The crisp fall air carried the scent of wood smoke from somewhere down the street. In another life, we might have been sitting by our own fire right now, planning the weekend, talking about nothing important. "How have you been?" she asked, her tone carefully casual. "I've been good," I replied. "Business is solid." "I can see that." Her eyes drifted to where the Rolls-Royce sat in the driveway. "The company looks like it's really taking off. I always knew you had it in you." I almost laughed at that. Almost. "Did you?" Her smile faltered. She looked down at her hands, twisting a ring on her right finger, not a wedding band, I noticed. I deserve that, she admitted quietly. The practiced composure I'd seen when she first arrived began to crack. Her shoulders slumped slightly, and something changed in her eyes, the careful mask slipping to reveal something raw underneath. Things haven't gone well for me, Owen. Her voice caught, just slightly. After I left, I watched her struggle, remembering how she'd always hated showing vulnerability. The woman who'd walked out of our marriage with her chin high was crumbling right before my eyes. I thought I knew what I wanted, she continued, words tumbling out faster now. I met someone who promised me everything, stability, security, but it all fell apart. He left me with debts I'm still paying off. A tear slipped down her cheek. She brushed it away quickly, embarrassed. I lost my job last year. Had to move back in with my sister for a while. She gave a hollow laugh. Not exactly the glamorous life I imagined. I said nothing, just listened. Part of me felt a twinge of sympathy. The same part that had once promised to love her through better or worse. Another part remembered lying awake at night wondering why I hadn't been enough. When I saw you in that car, she took a deep breath. It was like seeing everything I threw away. I made a mistake, Owen, a terrible mistake. She stepped closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. We can start over, she whispered, her voice trembling. I know we can. What we had was real. I studied her face, the face I'd once known better than my own. The familiar curves and angles now lined with experiences I hadn't shared. Something inside me shifted, not toward anger or bitterness, but toward a strange, peaceful clarity. What we had was real, I agreed quietly. But you didn't want me, Natalie. You wanted comfort. That's not true, she protested, reaching for my hand. I didn't pull away, but I didn't grasp hers either. I loved you. I was just scared. And now? Now I know what matters. I've changed. I nodded slowly. People do change, I said, meeting her gaze evenly. But not backwards. The words hung between us like a verdict. Her fingers fell away from mine. The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. This wasn't a negotiation or a second chance. It was a goodbye we should have had years ago. Tears streaked down her face, no longer hidden or brushed away. Owen, please. I stepped back, my hand finding the Rolls-Royce key in my pocket, its weight solid and real. Take care of yourself, Natalie. The key glinted under the porch light as I turned to go back inside. Owen. Her voice was barely a whisper now, her hand reaching toward me one last time. The next morning, sunlight spilled through my kitchen windows, casting long golden rectangles across the hardwood floors. I stood by the counter, coffee mug warming my palms, watching dust motes dance in the beams of light. 6 years ago, I'd woken up on a cot in Ray's garage, staring at cobwebs on the ceiling and wondering if I'd ever sleep through the night again. Now I had this, my own kitchen, my own peace. The silence wasn't hollow anymore. I took another sip of coffee, savoring the bitter warmth. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Meeting downtown with Henderson Properties at 11. They wanted to discuss renovating an entire apartment complex, the kind of contract that would have seemed impossible back when I was patching drywall for gas money. I showered, dressed in a crisp button-down and slacks, and grabbed my leather portfolio. The rolls gleamed in the driveway, morning dew beaded across its surface. Sometimes I still felt strange sliding behind its wheel, like I was borrowing someone else's life. But I'd earned every inch of this new reality, paid for it in sleepless nights and calloused hands. Downtown traffic moved at its usual crawl. I didn't mind. The car's interior smelled of leather and possibility, the quiet purr of the engine a reminder that patience pays dividends. As I approached the intersection near Henderson's office building, I slowed for a red light. My eyes drifted to the cafe on the corner, the same spot where Natalie had first seen me in the Rolls. And there she was again, as if the universe had decided we needed one final scene. She stood outside the cafe door in a navy blazer that had seen better days, clutching what looked like a resume. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, her expression a mixture of determination and fatigue. Our eyes met through the window. Recognition flashed across her face. Surprise. then something that might have been shame. I gave her the smallest nod, not friendly, not cold, just acknowledgement. The light turned green. I drove on. No anger rose in my chest, no satisfaction at her struggle. Just a quiet certainty that we were exactly where we were supposed to be, me moving forward, her figuring out her own path. The meeting with Henderson went smoothly. We discussed timelines, materials, budgets. They liked my portfolio, appreciated my straightforward approach. We shook hands on the preliminary agreement. "We've heard good things about you, Grady," Henderson said as we wrapped up. "People say you build things to last." "That's the only way worth doing it," I replied. By evening, I'd picked up steaks and a bottle of wine and headed to Ray's place. Lena was already there when I arrived, helping her father set the table on the back deck. The same deck where I'd spent countless evenings rebuilding my life one nail at a time. "There he is," Ray called, waving a pair of tongs. "The man with the golden touch." "More like the calloused touch," I laughed, holding up the wine. Lena smiled, taking the bottle from me. "How'd the Henderson meeting go?" "Signed the preliminary agreement. We start next month." "Look at you," she said, nudging my shoulder. "Mr. Big Shot." We ate under the stars, the three of us. Family, though not by blood. The steaks were perfect, the conversation easy. Ray told stories about his worst clients, making us laugh until our sides hurt. Lena talked about expanding the accounting side of the business. I just listened, grateful for their presence in my life. When Ray raised his glass for a toast, I beat him to it. "To peace," I said quietly. "Not payback." They clinked their glasses against mine, not fully understanding the weight behind my words, but feeling it nonetheless. Later, after helping clean up, I stood in Ray's driveway next to the Rolls. The night air felt cool against my skin as I looked up at the stars scattered across the velvet sky. The same stars that had watched me cry on that first night in the garage apartment, when the divorce papers were still fresh in my hands. I ran my fingers along the car's smooth contour, thinking about how far I'd come. Not just financially, but as a man. I hadn't just recovered. I'd rebuilt myself from the ground up. Some people chase wealth their entire lives, thinking it will heal whatever hurts inside them. But I'd learned something different on this long road back. I'd chased peace, and found both. I believe stories such as this find us for a reason. If this one touches you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day. In the meantime, there are 2 stories on the screen that are even better.